Greetings to all life forms and life workers who have found this, choosing your first divination deck. In this video, I will be discussing 10 different decks that I use and how all of them could be a good first deck for someone, and debunking some common misconceptions about tarot and oracle card readers and what's a good deck to begin with. So, most people, I'm going to debunk the first two most common misconceptions I know. You hear about it sometimes in this community, where one is all readers have to be given their first deck, which I very much disagree, because I believe, and others agree with me, that finding a deck that resonates with you, that you understand, and that you feel comfortable with is more important than waiting for someone to give one to you. And the second misconception, that a deck has to be passed on from a family member, that the deck has to be given to you from a family member. This does amplify the power of a deck, especially if they're passed away, but it's not a necessity by any means. Knowing that someone else has used it will add power to the deck, but could also add blocks and other types of energies attached to the cards. And one other misconception, I would say the third, is that all divination is evil. Witchcraft and negativity. Any type of divination should be avoided. I believe divination has been used throughout all time, and every wise teacher used some form of divination. They just didn't call it that. Divination is a wide topic, and it covers all kinds of things, from palm reading to cloud reading to plant reading, and just to intuition. So the main misconception to move past is that divination's evil and a negative thing. It can be. People can use divination for manipulation, control, and dark forces, but it can also be used for the opposite. A hammer can either be used to build a house or break a window. All hammers shouldn't be banned and vilified because of that. So, some of the few things I hear that I kind of disagree with choosing your first deck is that you should always choose and begin with a Rider-Waite tarot. This is one of the older decks created by a esoteric group, the Order of the Golden Dawn. And this was Rider and Waite. They contacted Smith, who was an artist, and they had these cards made based on the esoteric things that they talked about in this group, as well as based on the 15th century Visconti series of different decks from Europe, and they took the form of those decks and added more mystic symbolism onto the cards, so even the court cards were not the only ones with symbolism. They would give symbolism to the suit cards. And so many people believe that this is the best deck to begin with. I disagree. I think this is an advanced deck, and most of the modern decks are Rider-Waite variants, meaning that they take the idea, the theme, the structure of these cards, but they add different symbols, they add different references to other media. So no matter which of the more common decks are Rider-Waite based, and it's easier to understand these symbolisms if you have a previous attachment with, say, the source material, to the art style, or to the artist. So, and then you have oracle cards, and there's many different types of oracle cards. The first one I received, which is the anime angel oracle, and know that some people claim that you shouldn't use oracle cards, to just stick with tarot, and some oracle card readers say you shouldn't use tarot, just use oracle. And there's a lot of people who use both. The main difference is the tarot comes from a structured system of 78 cards generally, which is broken into the minor and major arcana. Arcana means secrets. And This is a more ancient system. We don't know where it actually comes from. Some theories is that tarot started in the 15th century in Europe, and then there's another school of thought which claims that tarot dates back to Thoth, the god of knowledge in ancient Egypt. So know that any type of divination is never one rule. If any person is really trying to tell you only this is right, this is wrong, they really don't understand that the core value of the alchemical teachings or any of the ancient knowledge. Because the idea is every system has a piece of the full spectrum of truth, of information, and each individual card is a piece of that, and you use that to gain information, to gain clarity of what you're asking the cards. So a way that if you would like to get into oracle cards, the 3 recommendations I have for you is, one is go to a store or shop that sells these cards and ask if they're selling any of the demos of oracle cards. So most of the shops use a demo deck, usually a prototype or a first run of the deck given to them by the publisher, to use to sell the deck for any potential customer so they can use it and see the cards, hold them, and then put them back. Oftentimes, these are replaced once they get slightly damaged, but they sell them at discounted prices. And that's how I got this one, and it was the very first deck I received of any kind, and I didn't use it for quite a while, and it is one of my favorites now. But the idea is, same with thrift stores, yard sales, any place where you go and you might see a divination deck. Know that if you're drawn to it, I like anime and I like angels, so I knew I would be interested in this deck particularly, so I grabbed it and paid $5 for it, and it was used, and now it still is used. That's first recommendation. The second one of oracle cards is to create your own oracle cards from existing things that you might have. So these could be postcards, stamps. I use Magic the Gathering cards, which is a playing game, fantasy card game. And so I take these cards and then I use them as symbols, even though they're not intended for divination. I use these pre-existing images. You could use trading cards, sports cards, greeting cards, and take the images, cut them to a size you like, and use these pre-existing images as oracle cards. Which means you come up with a deck, you hit all the different frequencies you would like, and I will make another video of how to make your own oracle decks in the future. But just loosely speaking is, find different things that are messages to you that you understand, that you know the symbolism for, and use this deck for yourself, and then once you've mastered it, you can start giving readings to other people. And this really helps for a lot of people because we already have a connection to these pre-existing symbols, and we're better able to understand them. And then the third option, which is the one I highly recommend, is to create your own oracle card decks. So grab a basic deck of 52 playing cards and the 2 jokers, and grab a Sharpie, and with your intuition, either take each card, you can write it out in advance, or just trust your intuition, and transform them into oracle cards. Each one having a different meaning. Add any symbols you like, any information, use as much as the cards, and you can go off of the meanings, the divination meanings of each of the individual 52 cards, or you can disregard those and put any images that you want on any of the cards. Or you can do what I do, is do a little mix. So sometimes it lines up with the exact commonly used cardistry meaning for the 52 cards, or it's something completely different, your own, or a mix of the two. So just with Oracle, there's no system like the tarot. It's generally whatever the reader, the Oracle, symbols that they understand and that they know how to translate to someone else or to themselves. And there's quite a few different examples of ones out for sale. So if you don't like any of those three options, you can look online and find Oracle cards that just resonate with you, either something that you already understand, a media property, an artist, or for this next one, a scientist. So Dr. Emoto is a researcher and scientist who has studied the water molecules and how with different words and intentions the water molecules change form. And I have studied and been interested in this science discovery and all of the papers that Dr. Emoto has made. I did not know until someone gave me the Water Crystal Oracle deck, where each card is a microscopic image of a water molecule, and then on the back tells you what word and what frequency affected the image. And the booklet doesn't give you much information on what each of these images means. So then you trust your intuition, then you research the crystalline patterns, the fogginess of the cards, the reflections of the light on the image, and you use those to give the meanings, and also what the word means as well. So this one is, I consider, to be a very advanced deck with very little information. So the main four, just to sum up with Oracle cards before I move on to Tarot, is to find one that resonates with you, one that focuses with you based on your interest. And two is to find a used one from a yard sale, thrift store, or a shop that has used decks for sale, usually demo decks. Option number three is use pre-existing artwork from magazines, cards, any type of artwork you have, and to create your own Oracle cards from pre-existing artwork. And then number four is to grab a basic 52 playing card deck and a Sharpie and transform those into your own Oracle cards with your own art. Or find an artist to do it with you with collaboration. Just know that you can use both Oracle and Tarot. They are very different, but there are some similarities. And trust your intuition and know that these are all tools to help your intuitive. The cards don't have the power of anything other than what our intuition tells us. Every book and every how to read certain decks are just guidelines, a place to begin. So don't hold them as hard, fast, dogmatic rules. Know that your intuition supersedes any of what a card should mean. So you do not need someone to give it to you, and you do not need to spend $1,000 on a deck. Some of the $1,000 decks are really good, and you might want them at some point, but it's not a necessity. You can create one for very little money, or you can find a used one as well. So be open to the full spectrum there. Now I'm going to move on to Tarot, and as I mentioned, the Rider-Waite is commonly considered to be the best starting point deck. I don't agree with that. I think it's very complex and it's misleading, and multiple people say the Rider means different things. There's a lot of contradictory information on the Rider-Waite, and it is very hard to study. So unlike Oracle cards, there's not much study there. But in Tarot, there's a lot of research, study, theory, and ethics that come in because it has been used more professionally for hundreds of years, and different levels in that. So my recommendations for Tarot is, one is do your research, and if you're like me, you're going to learn about the Visconti. I'll show you the box here. So from the 15th century, the Royal Visconti family had these decks, and we don't know all of them. There's many different decks. The most completed one we have was missing a few of the cards, and they were redone by artists in the style of the other cards. And the images are not fully defined, they have a lot of complexity, and they generally hold heretic, which means the family's symbols, and multiple symbols associated with this very powerful family, depicted in the hats, in the clothing, and in the backgrounds. And so these are really difficult for study, but for some people who like the more historic energy of tarot, I recommend finding one of the older 15th and 16th century tarot, and the spelling Tarocchi, Tarocchi, and we don't know the full definition of that word. Any of these older decks can really help with the education, because even the Rider-Waite is based off of this original structure and these entities that appear, such as Justice and Temperance and the Hierophant and the Hanged Man. They exist in these original decks, and the most structure comes from there. We don't know the origin of who created this system. We don't know the meanings, the exact meanings of these systems. All we have is theory. So that's the main thing I want to impress into my audience here, is tarot is theory. There's no fact. No one actually has the true facts of tarot. And if someone claims to, they're most likely false. And whether or not they know that, but there's no actual definition of anything associated with the tarot. It is all speculation. And be open to that, and know that your intuition of what it means is equally as valid as what 100 different textbooks and reference books say about the tarot. So you can look into the older decks. You can also, based off of the Rider-Waite, there was quite a few also esoteric society decks, such as the Thoth Tarot and the Universal Tarot, which takes the original idea of the Rider, and they remove some of the colors and some of the more esoteric symbols, and they add different symbols and different energies to that original, and different colors to the original deck. And then you have what happened in the 1960s and 70s throughout the world, where the tarot was used as a party game, and a deck of the tarot cards were used as gaming cards for families as a form of entertainment. These were based on the Rider-Waite oftentimes, and what they would do is remove a lot of the more detail, a lot of the esoteric and more hidden information, and then just leave empty space and remove the artist's signature, change the art style, and simplify the cards for a gaming purpose, where the cards were more so for the game, but the individual cards still retain a lot of their meanings. So this deck, it was made in 1972 and was meant for gaming and some reading, but it was my great-grandma, so it was passed on to me. Like I said before, some of the decks that are passed on to you have different abilities, different sensations when you read them intuitively to other decks, but this is not a requirement by any means. It's just an added bonus. And so you can try to find some of these bridge tarot decks that are more simplified. I recommend them over the Rider-Waite. It's a more simplified version of that, and when you feel you have mastered it, you find the Rider-Waite, and you can compare and contrast the differences between the decks and see how things are similar and different but still the same card, the same message, or maybe different messages based on how you intuitively perceive them. And everything with the tarot is, oftentimes people want to be dogmatic, has to be this way, that's the only way. And people recommend that you do not buy your own deck to begin with, where I see there is a good purpose of that. You find a deck that you already understand the symbols to, will make it easier for you to read. So the first tarot deck I received, I purchased, was the Shadow of Oz Tarot. And this deck is a Rider-Waite variant, but uses the characters and setting from the 14 turn-of-the-century books from L. Frank Baum, the Wizard of Oz books, which is just the first. And they take the characters and the settings and they apply them to the tarot. So the Hermit's still the Hermit, but now he's the Shaggy Man. And the character of the Shaggy Man adds to the reading and is more important than the Hermit, even though he was always the Hermit even in the story. He holds that archetype. So with the tarot, these are archetypes. And the Rider-Waite is the more broad archetype, where the more specialized decks, such as the Shadow of Oz, and other types of, like the Lord of the Rings tarot and the tarot of the Bible, are more specialized tarot that based on pre-existing material, and they apply the symbolism there to the archetypes and symbolism of the tarot. This is easier for a new person to learn, I have found, because you already understand the emotion behind the symbol because you have experienced it, and now you understand the transition and the focus of those emotions. And then with tarot, one other thing too is be open to more of the darker and occult sides of tarot. On Etsy and other sales platforms, there's artists who are just professional artists who want to create their own tarot. And these are art tarots. And I use the Book of the Dead tarot. And in this deck, all of the cards are skeletal and have different designs on them and hold a lot of extra symbolism than most other decks. Still a Rider-Waite variant, which is again taking the original structure of the Rider-Waite, which was taken from the decks from the 15th century, and take that structure and applying it to the style and the feeling of the individual artist. These are usually made by one or two artists, and it is a passion project that takes quite a few years to make and has a lot more. They usually come with a book, and these books tell you the meaning. Just use the books as a starting point instead of the only way to do it, the rule, and allow these things to help you choose your first deck. Just know that if you have a deck and you're not using it, but you want to be a reader, but you're waiting on someone to give you one or the right one to show up, just use what you have and use what you're drawn to. You can find the Rider-Waite and a lot of these Visconti decks digitally, and other types of decks like the Leninad and other types of divination decks have existed for many years. There's a lot of research for you to do there. There's also rune cards, which are based off the Nordic rune system. There's Ogham, which is the Irish system based off of straight geometric lines. And there's other systems of divination. There's palm reading cards, where they put different types of palm structures on cards in the booklet to use them as examples. There's some that take different Victorian and Renaissance art, put them on cards as oracle cards or tarot. So just do your little research and know that whatever thing you already are passionate about and already really love, if you can find that in a card, it is so much easier to learn because you already have a passion for it, and that passion will just transition to divination, to understanding the unseen realm. And yes, it can be used for darkness, and I do not recommend anyone doing that because the penalties are high. But if you use it for light, that light is always going to come back to you. So remember that in life, all that you do will always come back. So if you do kindness, generosity, understanding, and peace, that's what's going to come back to you more than anything else. But if you do darkness, manipulation, lies, power over instead of power for, power with, or power of self, when you have these manipulated power for myself, power over others, then people are going to keep doing that to you. And you will make a very vicious system. So this is my recommendation for anyone interested in starting with divination. And I hope this informs you. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment in this video or send me an email. And I do live demonstrations of my services with 7 of my decks every day. I do this so the audience has multiple options because each person resonates to a certain type of message. So what I'll leave this with you is there's multiple readers who only use one deck for their whole time. That's totally fine, and I respect that. I see there's a lot of value in doing that and mastery of one system. But there's also people who have many different systems, and they don't always stick to one, so their mastery of any one isn't high, but their mastery of the general concepts of all the decks is. And then you can always find the middle ground, which I strive to, which is picking a number, for me it's 7, of decks that I will continue to master and educate myself on, that covers the full spectrum of the human experience and the cosmic experience. And these 7 can change, but know that any hard and fast rule probably doesn't actually work when it comes to tarot. And every rule should be taken loosely because they're just guidelines. And sometimes the best images are when you color outside the lines. So I'll leave you with that. Much love and gratitude to you all. Thank you for your time, your energy, and your interest in the divination realm.